Good morning, everybody. Um, okay, so is this a good volume? Okay. I've been looking forward to this bridge service for quite some time. Pastor Fred actually asked me about half a year ago to share my testimony with you all. And I told him I would love to, but can I finish chemotherapy first? Yeah, but I will get to that more on that later. So my name is Andrew Furuyama, and I've been a member here at Wintersburg for a couple years now. I didn't grow up at this church, but I'm so thankful that I did find this church. I was born and raised in Mission Viejo, California, and raised in a Christian household. That is me on the right, sporting the Oshkosh Bagosh and the rite of passage bowl cut. So I grew up, I think like most kids in Orange County, going to the beach, eating a ton of In-N-Out. I wasn't raised in the Asian American community, but that's probably why I can actually speak Spanish better than Japanese. But I digress. So a lifelong passage for me has been in the Bible. It's Proverbs 3, verses 5 through 6. It says, "Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all of your ways acknowledge him, and he will make your path straight." I grew up hearing this passage thinking it meant that you just have trust in God and you'll be okay. It's kind of like a life guidance, but I didn't really realize what it meant really till my adult life, like college and post-college life, by putting it into practice. So let's see. Oh, no, not yet. Okay. So like I mentioned before, I was raised in a Christian household. So from a very young age, I assumed I was automatically a Christian. It wasn't until summer camp when I was like 12 years old, or when I was 12 years old, that I understood and placed my faith and life in following God. Even still, it wasn't until probably a couple more years later in high school when I learned the difference between labeling myself as a Christian and walking and living a life for Jesus. So, okay. I just threw that in there. That's me in high school. I was in marching band. That's me in the front with the gold streaky hair. Yeah, let's move on. So when I was in high school, I would play the bass guitar. You guys, a lot of you have probably seen me play over in the sanctuary for a service. And it was during those years, in my mid-teenage years, when I started reading books by Christian authors. And one of my favorites is called Mark of the Christian by Francis Schaeffer. And the basic premise of the lecture or the book is that the mark that he's talking about is love, that God sent Jesus out of love. It's just a lot of love. So as Christians, we know that we're supposed to minister to those that don't know Jesus, but often we forget, or at least for myself, that we're also ministering those that do know Jesus, that are close to us. Anyone in our obligatory closest social circle, even if we disagree on fundamental theology. So Schaeffer is posing this question of how can the non-believing world believe that Jesus and Christianity are true if Christians can't even get along with Christians? That's an impact that it really had a profound impact on me. So it just changed my views to just exhibit Christ's love. Yeah, it's not like when we're around Christians, we just turn it off and we just be ourselves. We are exhibiting Christ's love at all time. So it's during these years, like right before I graduated high school, I felt like God was equipping me to be tested for my faith. So in 2003, I packed everything up and moved to Northern California and went to college at San Francisco State University. Go Gators. I lived in the dorms and made a lot of friends, and it was like a lot of dorm talks. You talk about everything, but sometimes I had friends that were non-believers or claim to be Muslim, Catholic, agnostic, atheist, self-spiritual, a bunch of things. And sometimes the conversations could turn heated. I mean, because we get passionate about what we believe in. Being away from home, growing up in Orange County, I'm a suburb boy. And San Francisco, it's very urban, it's very fast-paced, it's very liberal, and I just wasn't prepared for it. I got really homesick for a couple years, and I guess I got depressed, and I just wanted to come home because I knew it'd be comfortable. My sophomore year of college, I told my parents, I want to drop out of college. Like, I hate it here. I am so unhappy. And by God's providence, I was actually sitting in the room of Craig Takashima complaining about how I just wanted to move home. I didn't like it here. I'm done. And Craig, he actually repeatedly encouraged me and implored me. He's like, why don't you try checking out Asian American Christian Fellowship? And growing up in Mission Viejo, I had like less than 5 Asian acquaintances, not even much less friends. So it was kind of weird for me to go to a fellowship where everyone looked like me, kind of. So it was so I'm like, everyone's Asian, and people are like, hello. So I threw myself into AACF, as we called it, and actually by the end of the year, I was elected by my peers. You don't run for it. I was elected to be core coordinator. It's like the president of the fellowship. But I was still struggling with if I was going to drop out of school and just go home and be miserable, or to serve the commitment that I was being asked to do. And I remember I was in the Sunset District of San Francisco. I was sitting on the porch of a church. I was going to be playing bass guitar for a joint praise night for AACF for Berkeley, UC Davis, San Francisco, and San Jose. And I was just sitting there by myself, like, what do I do, God? What do I do? And my cell phone rang, and it was one of my pastors from my childhood church, and he's just like, hey, I've been praying for you. What are you going to do? We all want to know. And I actually, at that point, I hadn't made a decision, but when he called me and I was just staring at the sun, and I was like, I'm going to stay. I am terrified. I don't have a place to live next year, but I'm going to stay. Like, I'm going to see this through. We had the praise night. It was great. And then from that point on, I was on fire, like, for God. At AACF, we got to the point where weekly attendance was like 10 or 12 people. So sometimes half the worship team was on the stage, and there's like less people in the congregation. So I asked people, why don't you come? Or people that I knew used to come or had stopped coming. And they're like, we don't start on time, or it takes forever to find a place to eat after. I have to study. I have a test tomorrow, or I have an 8 a.m. class tomorrow. So I took a lot of these complaints and I addressed them with my new core. And I think it was effective because when we had about 10 to 12 people, this is the core team I was on, me still spotting spiky yellow hair. But my core was very solid. It was awesome. We collaborated well. Weekly attendance went from about 10 to 12 people to about 45 a week. I was really happy, and I was just elated to see how God was working in the fellowship, and I was just super happy. Let's see. So that was my junior year of college. After I graduated college, I decided to keep living in San Francisco. I got engaged and married my girlfriend from the fellowship. And after working, I just decided, I missed my family still. My brother started having kids, and I was like the only one that was not near family. So we packed everything up and moved back to Orange County in 2010. And one critical thing that me and my wife didn't do was we didn't get plugged into a church. I didn't realize, I thought I was set, but I didn't realize how important that was till after. I was still working for Wells Fargo, but everything was different because like my childhood friends were gone. The life that I was yearning for from years ago was gone. And that's when life it began to it really began to crumble. So like at my job, I was working at Wells Fargo, and the sales goals got really high and pretty much impossibly out of reach. And my supervisor, I later kind of learned it and kind of concluded he was mentally abusive. He'd convinced me not only was I a bad worker, but like a terrible worker. So I would go home mentally defeated, drained, and really cranky, and it just it was a very dark time in my life. I really lost who I was, and at one point, my coworkers started showing me that they had been receiving text messages and emails from my supervisor slandering me, saying Andrew's unreliable, he can't do his job, and I was stunned because just to see these words of just such malicious intent. And so I started collecting these documents, these texts and emails, and I was going to present them to human resources, but at this point, my marriage had gotten so bad. One night, I felt blindsided, but I got served divorce papers, and my life fell apart. It was like an atom bomb went off in my head. I resigned from my job immediately, and I fell into a really deep state of depression. I was lost. I was really lost. Let's see. For about a year, I got a new job, but I was flying very low under the radar. So for about a year, I just cloistered myself from the world, and was kind of just living off of Facebook, cyber stalking my friends. That was my glimpse into the outside world, you could say. But I still wasn't going to church, and after about a year, it kind of felt like the dust had settled. Life was moving on. I guess you could say without me, but that was a good thing. And one Sunday morning, I felt like God was nudging me. I remembered I was sitting on the ground, just feeling sorry for myself, but it felt like God was telling me that verse: trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways, acknowledge him, and he will make your path straight. And from that, I got up and was like, I need to find a church. I need to find a church. People will have to hear my story, and I have to own up to it, but I have to find a church. So it took about 2 years. I visited about 8 or 9 churches. I can't recall, but it's kind of like a Goldilocks situation where it has to feel just right. So I went to some where the music's too loud, or my friend invited me to his Korean-speaking church, and he's like, well, I understand it. I'm like, I don't. Come on. After about 8 or 9 churches, my parents suggested, well, why don't you check out Wintersburg Presbyterian in Santa Ana? I was like, I've never heard of it. But I was definitely open to it because I was determined to find a place. And my first day in the sanctuary, if you're familiar with the sanctuary, I walked in, and I kind of scoped out the area where I thought younger adults were looking, and coincidentally, I sat in the area called the young adult section, so that worked. So Pastor Ted Esaki, he saw me, and after the service, he came up to me. He's like, "You're new, aren't you?" I'm like, Yeah, I am. And the first person he introduced me to was Jason Cheng. That's Providence. Jason immediately started introducing me to others like Ryo Yoshida, Ryan Najima, Ryan Yamamoto. But long story short, I've been here ever since that first day when I visited. So, do the next one. So being at Wintersburg, it's been wonderful. It saved me in so many ways. The friendships and bonds I've made have been undeniably by God's infinite love and grace for me. I remember telling people my first year, I'm experiencing something that's been missing from my life, and it's something called joy. So as I mentioned, people have seen me on the praise team. I play the bass guitar. I play the guitar. I'm a music person. It enabled me to express myself musically, which I love doing. So I remember it just felt like everything had fallen into place again. And then this past June, I started feeling kind of like stomach cramps. And people know me as a foodie. So I eat weird stuff, like deep fried everything, like deep fried again. And, I thought I was just having stomach pains and just discomfort. And so over the course of a week, I went from having minor stomach pain, which I thought was gas, to my belly growing daily, like a centimeter a day. It would start to protrude. And later, my family would come to describe it, saying I looked like I was second trimester pregnant because it'd gotten so large in a week. So the pain grew so intense that I was implored to go to the ER. So I went to St. Joe's in Orange. It's just a couple miles down the road from here. They ran a CT scan on me, and I'll never forget what the doctor said. He came in, he had this straight, serious face, and he says, I have news, and it's not good. You have lesions growing in your colon and liver. And I was like, what? Usually you'd think like, oh my gosh, but for me, I'm just like, what are lesions? Oh, it's cancer. I have cancer. So some of the tumors were the sizes of like a golf ball, a baseball, and a softball. And if you don't follow sports, the size of a lime, a lemon, and a grapefruit. They had grown so large, they had completely blocked my colon, and everything was backing up, and my intestines were on the verge of bursting, and I probably likely would have died. The surgeon who, this is a picture of me after my emergency surgery to clear the blockage, but the surgeon said I was probably maybe about a day, at most 2, away from this all occurring, and I probably might not be here. This was just this past June, not the most recent June. This was June of 2017. And I had to recover for about a week in the hospital, but I was still worrying about the tumors that were growing inside of me. I mean, the biggest ones were in my liver, but I mean, my oncologist, he said your liver was stuffed with cancerous material. My dad sent faxes of my diagnosis to what we can say like the best hospitals in Southern California, and I ended up at USC's Norris Comprehensive Care Center, or Comprehensive Cancer Center, and where I was immediately put on, from my understanding, is a very harsh chemotherapy regimen in an attempt to shrink the tumors. So that began, as a lot of you know, my 10-month cancer battle, where I would struggle physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually. Let me find my place. Yeah, so chemotherapy, if you don't know, it's medically induced poison. It's meant to kill cancer cells, but unfortunately, it also, it's still poison, so it attacks your body too. So daily, I would get chemo every other week, so I would experience all-day nausea, excruciating mouth sores to the point where I couldn't even talk, which is probably good for my parents. I lost a lot of hair. I didn't go bald, but I lost a lot of hair. I would lose my taste. I would have perpetual headaches, daily bloody noses repeatedly throughout the day, dizziness, feverish night sweats, and let's just say painful stuff on the lower half too. It was tough. I'm going to say that's an understatement to say it was tough, but there were times when I couldn't sit up, eat, go to the restroom. I had to relinquish all control to my parents and my loved ones to completely take care of me because I felt terrible. A lot of the times I would nap just so I wouldn't have to be awake to experience these things, these symptoms. Just so I could be seconds or minutes or hours closer to feeling a little better, and then do it all over again a week later. Repeatedly, often I would think, why is this happening to me, or what did I do? But as a Christian, that's not how it is. God is just and sovereign, and he often reminded me, is how can I use this as my life story, no matter the outcome? So I had to face the possible reality early on that I might die. I was diagnosed when I was 32. But God might be calling me home. And I realized this was a very real situation I had to face. But 6 months after into chemo, I got good news that the chemo, or I had known, but we were tracking my progress, but we knew that the tumors were shrinking. The chemo was receptive, and if some of you saw me, I started to look like a skeleton, but on my healthy weeks, I tried to come here because I really wanted to be here to see all of you. It really helped get me through. And so let me see. This is actually the bridge service from January of 2018. So I kind of feel like I've come full circle, that once I was being talked about or prayed for, but now I get to be here to talk to you about my story. So let me get back to my notes here. That the surgery took about 10 hours, almost 10 hours, multiple surgeon teams, and all the tumors were removed successfully from my colon and liver. And I was wheeled out to go to recovery, and my torso, I will not show you, looked pretty much like the board game Operation. I just have scars and incisions everywhere, but I'm alive. So, let me see. Yeah, a couple of months, here's me after this is actually my birthday. My birthday is on January 11th, and my surgery was on January 10th. So, I tell people, despite how I look, this is probably the best birthday I've ever had, because I might not be here. So I'll take this over anything. Couple more months, I had to do more chemotherapy after and recover and get my strength back. I'd lost a lot of muscle mass from being practically bedridden a lot, or barely able to walk a couple blocks a lot of the time. But I'm here and I get to tell you my story. And back in June, I got to celebrate. My friends here threw me a Cancer Sucks party, and but you probably recognize a lot of these people, and these people are like my family. It's been, the last couple of years have been, I can't describe, I'm getting choked up right now, so. But what I'm excited to be able to say is, because as it's in the program, but like yesterday, I got married. A year ago, it was even a year ago, we didn't know if this was going to be possible. By the grace of God, I'm here. If there's something I can leave you with, though, thought about to a great extent, is that we as humans, we are all still terminal. So healthy or sick, no matter what we do, we all will eventually pass. But I'm grateful that I believe in the one and true God that offers us eternal life for free through his son, Jesus. It's his good news, his truths, his redeeming power gives us new life because he loves us and wants to spend eternity with us. So I just say in my life, and to encourage you to trust in the Lord with all of your heart. Lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways, acknowledge him, and he will make your path straight. Thank you.
All right.
Sure. Didn't want. So I'm going to update. I did have a recent scan, and it turns out there's a little bit more cancerous material that had spread to my lungs. They're very tiny. They're like 3 by 5 millimeters is like the biggest one. So not the grapefruit size before, but I met with doctors, and we're working out a plan of action. But I'm still trusting, but believe that I'll be okay. But please pray for me. But thank you all for just the support and for having to sit and listen to me.